Welcome everybody to this week's edition of the Liberty First Foundation Roundtable. We're getting a little bit of a late start, and I apologize for that. Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome, and I'm sure we're going to have quite the year again this year. We said last year is going to be a shit show, and it definitely proved to be a shit show. It's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next few days in between now and the election certification and the inauguration. For sure. There's been a lot of buzz on Twitter about how they're claiming that this election isn't a valid election because of Russia and interference and so forth.
Oh my God.
But the interesting thing I find on that is there's not been one single case or suit filed claiming that the 2025 election is invalid. Not one single suit.
Well, of course it's not, because didn't the Democrats in 2020 and 2022 fix everything so that every election is now the most secure election that ever existed? And they changed the laws, they changed the regulations, they changed the way that we vote. They fixed it all. So how can they now say that the very system they put in place is now somehow corrupt?
Yeah.
It's their system.
And like
Well,
I said, there hasn't been one single suit filed.
There hasn't been
They're claiming that supposedly there were a lot of votes that just went up and went missing, and this, that, and the other.
right at the beginning there, they were talking about how the drop in the number of votes between the 20. Okay, so it was 2020. So the 81 million votes right at the beginning there, where they were talking about the loss of the 15 million votes or whatever. That took up all of like the first week after the election, and then it dropped. It disappeared. The whole discussion of it just disappeared.
It had to, because it was being brought up that the 2024 election was more like every other election.
Up
and
until
the 2020 election was the outlier.
Right.
So if they kept reiterating that, it was going to draw too much attention on the 2020 election, and they couldn't have that.
No, but then about three weeks after that, so after that 1 week when they were talking about the 15 million votes, then they were talking about, especially Jamie Raskin, Representative Raskin was talking about how they were going to file two sets of electors. And they were gonna have a blood sport in the Senate to fight over which electors were going to be certified.
Actually, it wasn't Raskin who did that. That was out of Tennessee, and Wiley. What was Wiley's? North Carolina. North Carolina. I forget the representative's last name. Wiley. He actually put forth the idea that the Democrats were going to have an entire shadow government. So every position filled by a Republican would have a counterpart purely on the Democratic side to do international politics, to respond to all of the government issues and decisions, which is the building block of an insurrection. They're building the infrastructure of an alternate government to replace the actually officially elected government.
But even that ended up fizzling out. Like that discussion.
Well,
it's if it isn't being discussed publicly, it's been placed underground, and it's completely underground that they're talking about this now. But it's left the news cycle. There is no news cycle on it.
Well, now there's a big push that Trump is ineligible, which they started pushing this prior to the election, due to the 14th Amendment, and because he supposedly participated in an insurrection. Except there has been no due process involved with any insurrection charges. whatsoever. And that's when they bring up Article 3 of the 14th Amendment, they purposely neglect the first article of the 14th Amendment, which is the one that requires due process before anybody is deprived of any of their rights.
Yeah.
It's interesting that where they're trying to focus attention, we've been seeing this for a while, that they're trying to shift the attention of the public so that they can excuse some of the things that have been done and that Democrats are planning to do. And I think that's kind of sad. I mean, at this point, if on January 21st, 2025, first day of Trump's administration, if he doesn't rescind or repeal the 19th Amendment, the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, if he doesn't, the 12th Amendment, if the Constitution and the amendments still exist after the 21st, I will be sorely disappointed because all of the mainstream news media, the left-leaning news media, have been guaranteeing that Black people are going back in chains, women are going into the kitchens, no more rights will exist, and we will suddenly be in this authoritarian government, unlike the democratic authoritarian regulations, a brand new authoritarianism that no one has ever, there's no evidence of it. No evidence of it. But if it did, but they've been telling us this, they promised it. I mean, I don't get it. I don't
No,
understand.
in fact, the Democrat side has been fairly silent. I mean, as far as the news goes, they've been pointing to a lot of external and internal unrest and focusing on that rather than whatever the Democrat Party is doing. Like the last big hoo-ha was the mass pardonings of all predecessing officials in different capacities within the federal government. And that was the last thing that you saw that the Democrat Party was pushing, was all these pardons so that they can't be taken to court on federal charges by the Trump administration when he finally gets into office. That was the last thing you've really seen. Anything else has been about H-1B visas and what, who's supporting that or who's not supporting that. There's been the astroturfing of a right-wing civil war inside the party. And instead of like it just being a passionate discussion about our broken immigration system and how it needs to be revamped, they see it. They've been trying to sell it as a civil war. You're seeing now a bunch of violent altercations. The latest being the New Orleans massacre with the vehicle that was rented and led into the country 2 days ago. What else? The happenings of China. What?
Okay, New Orleans. What was let into the country 2 days ago?
There was a truck that crossed the border that was implicated in the New Orleans massacre. It was driven by an American.
Yeah.
But it was rented and driven across the border 2 days ago. Then it was let through.
It had Texas plates.
Yeah, it did have Texas plates. It was a Texas registered vehicle, but the person who drove it was an American with an ISIS. But it seems there's an ISIS flag in there in the vehicle, as reported by CNN most recently. Reported that they had the ISIS flag and some of the problems with the driver.
The cursory information about the driver is that he's former military and that he was actually turned in to the army, his army COC for radicalization.
And they have been they upplayed the fact that he was in the army. They downplayed his radicalization and or even mention of the radicalization. Like CNN doesn't even mention it at all. It's they're trying to hide that and to minimize the fact that it's terrorism in the United States, radicals in the United States, rather than and try and make it out to be, well, it's the army, it's an army issue. No, it's like the Fort Hood shooting.
Right.
That wasn't about the U.S. Army. That was about a radical of with very extremist religious ideology that attacked American citizens. It was terrorism,
right?
Just like this one.
Yeah, and just like that too, it can also be pointed to the Biden administration's handling of their higher military authorities who didn't want to touch this guy, like because they were afraid that it was going to be a big DEI case.
Well, I got some related breaking.
What's that?
I got some related breaking on this too. Has anybody seen anything on this?
What, the Las Vegas Cybertruck?
Yeah.
Yeah, supposedly it was carrying a large amount of fireworks.
Fireworks and either liquid gas or gas containers, which might have been for a grill. They're not quite sure. And some other materials in there. It's unclear if it was a firework that went off accidentally and because of all the things in it, it blew up, or if it was done on purpose to be a terror attack and it just wasn't a very effective one.
Yeah.
There is a body in the car, unknown if it's male or female, because when an electric vehicle goes up in flames, it incinerates, literally incinerates the body. So there's no way to tell.
Yeah, it burns at like 3,200 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, it's like cremation. So that was a cremation. So they have no idea right now. They believe there was a male driver an hour earlier. And then just seconds before the vehicle blew up, that driver returned to in front of the Trump Tower. So there's a couple of questions because obviously it's a Cybertruck, Tesla, Elon Musk in front of Trump Tower, the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas, Trump administration. So you've got that event, but I don't think that's necessarily my theory is Democrats have so demonized being white, being Republican, being make America great again. They have so demonized it, and they have so minimized our laws. I mean, bail reform, the revolving door, people because of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. Because of that, they have minimized the charges or eliminated many charges. You know, the $1,000 shoplifting spree, which changed now as of January 1st. It's now reduced, as some people are being surprised and finding out in California. But
and it's been classified as a felony now.
Yeah, it always was, but it used to be, and then they changed the laws. But the thing is that they've created this environment and this understanding that the law either doesn't exist or is only applicable to a specific type of person, usually being white, Republican, and MAGA. They get punished, and everyone else gets to, illegal aliens get to cross the borders. They get hotels. Black people get minimum sentences or revolving doors, usually even with repeat violent offenders. And they demonize people like Daniel Penny for the death of Jordan Neely, even though it was self-defense, and they're perfectly fine with demonizing him and trying to throw him in jail for life, even though he was defending other people, and it wasn't an intent to kill anyone. And there were 3 men involved, and it wasn't racial because of the makeup of everyone on the train. So when you put that environment out there where laws no longer matter, and the rule of law is subjective, why are criminals going to care?
Yeah.
Why are criminals going to even bother trying to minimize their crimes? And those individuals who are radicalized, the BLMs, the terrorist leaning individuals, why wouldn't they act out? They have no fear. There's no
Right.
fear of retribution. That makes sense?
Yeah. Well, it makes sense, and the fact that they're radicalized enough where they don't fear even death. I mean, they fully expect not to be able to breathe another day after something like that. So that's just part of, their mission.
Well,
So
not all of them. I mean, we can't say that. Like the guy who pushed a man in front of the one train in New York City yesterday, and the man survived. Luckily, the guy lived, which is really rare when you get pushed in front of a subway car. But he just walked past and just pushed the guy as the train was coming. No connection, doesn't know him. The only thing it seems to be evil white guy, Midtown Manhattan, black guy. Well, what do we do with evil white people? Because they're all evil and they're all white. So just throw them in front of a train.
I didn't hear about that. Does that
Yeah,
happen? That happened today?
that happened yesterday. Yesterday at about 12:30 in the afternoon, as I recall. And at the same time that we have Kathy Hochul taking selfies, she's doing a photo op of her taking a selfie saying the subways have never been safer. Meanwhile, people have been stabbed, they got shot, they got burned alive. There was another attempt to burn someone alive on the subway, and this guy get thrown under a train. Yeah, that was all in 1 week.
And that's that's the funny thing is I was actually watching, I think it was John Cassius or Cash John or something like that. I'll have to look at my Twitter feed again. I already posted it, but this guy, he's been following the subway issue down in New York and with the postings of the National Guard and everything. And he said, once you get past the security checkpoints, which are, they're searching people and they're doing illegal search and seizure, but they're also just letting people through. Once you get past those security checkpoints, there is no one riding the train with you that is in a law enforcement capacity. You are on your own. So it's easy for somebody to just go through, wait around on a platform, and then if they're intent on committing a crime, they're going to commit the crime when there's nobody around that's law enforcement related. And even if there are, once you get to the next platform, even then you're not helped out, because what did they do for the lady that was on fire? You're watching these policemen go back and forth, and they're looking at it going, oh man, I don't want to touch that. And they're waiting for backup. It's like, put the woman out. There are fire extinguishers right on the train. But nobody wants to intervene because they don't want to get slapped with some sort of lawsuit.
They don't want to be the next Dan Penny.
Right. And it's just sad. It's a sad state of affairs. And it's one of the things that really bothers me is the fact that we have the right to self-defense and to come to the defense of others. But we can't exercise it because the legal ramifications of that are enough to scare people into not doing it.
Well, that's just it. Okay. You always had the civil threat there, where if you used a firearm for defense,
right,
in a manner that was inconsistent with somebody else's rights, you could be sued for wrongful death or whatever.
Right.
Okay. And that's always been there.
Right.
In fact, now that you have the possibility of facing criminal charges, and oftentimes it's automatically assumed that you're a criminal if you
by summary judgment
do act.
Yeah.
Until it's proven that you're not. Okay, we have literally transformed this country from being, in many ways, from being a country of we the people, where the people operated the government and the people held government accountable, to a government that is operated by the government,
right?
For lack of a better phrase, so to speak. by the elite that oversee the people and hold the people accountable. And that's never been what our government was supposed to be. We've gone from where it used to be that you're innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
Now you're guilty until you prove your innocence. And that is in every realm. And I mean, Kamala Harris even so much as said so. With the stroke of a pen.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's all it takes. And you can literally ruin somebody. And the charges don't even have to be true. They can be fabricated. And automatically you're classified as guilty of them. We saw it play out prior to the election with Trump in many realms. We've seen it play out in other areas. We have more people in jail right now. I get last estimates say that about 20% of all people incarcerated currently are not guilty of the crimes that they were accused of.
Yeah. But they couldn't prove their innocence, so they got thrown in jail.
Taken and accepted plea bargains, even though they have done nothing wrong, because they didn't think that they could fight against the charges that were being waged against them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That they didn't have a defense against it. We see this going on and on and on and on. Okay. And right now, there's a lot of people that are wrongfully incarcerated, that are wrongfully charged, and are put into a situation where they have to literally roll the dice and hope that they are exonerated for something that they didn't do.
Right.
Or take this plea for some lesser crime and so they weigh that and they look at the risk versus reward scenario. And oftentimes with the way the prosecution presents it, with the way the cops are going at them, using lies and fabrications about what evidence they claim to have that they don't actually have, against these people, that they don't feel like they have any recourse. They don't have any type of defense.
Yeah.
Against this powerful government.
Essentially, what you're seeing is that the country has changed from citizenry to subjects, which is the same as any other government around the world. They don't really have citizens; they have subjects because they're subject to the government.
And I'm going to do a little promo here for us for just a little bit, because this is important. And it's not just for the Liberty First Foundation. It's for every organization out there that is fighting to restore the proper balance and get us away from this authoritarian government that we currently have in place. Okay? Folks, we can't do it alone. Our voice is minuscule as individuals, but we can, as a whole, start transforming our government back to what it should be. And I don't care if you're on the left. I don't care if you're on the right. I don't care if you're in the middle someplace. Right now, we're all fed up with the government. You go on Twitter, you go on Facebook, you go on any of them. You look at any of the political posts. I don't care what side they're coming from. All you see is this hate, this discourse about how bad the other side is.
When it's all bad.
And that just proves that we have a government, regardless of which side's in power, we have a government that our country does not trust.
No.
Okay? And who's to blame for that? We, the people, are the ones that are blamed for that. Okay, because we are not living up to our responsibilities and obligations to hold our governments accountable. So get involved. Okay, quit blaming the government for the woes that we are facing right now, and start looking in the mirror, because we're the ones that are responsible for our government.
The government won't reflect us being America first if the people are not there to say that we're American first.
Well, that's one of the problems.
Yeah.
One of the other problems is we have to pay attention to the legislation.
Right.
Jan was mentioning it in the commentary, in the comments, and she had mentioned, where is it?
Yeah,
Well, that's just it.
Hochul with the environments of the fuel. Yeah, the
Okay, she's
fuel
got three.
companies.
She's got three big legislations that she just signed. The temperatures in schools cannot be in excess of 88 degrees. There is the consumption tax or congestion tax in New York State. And there's also, New York City. And thirdly, there's this legislation about fuel to protect climate change, because climate change is, of course, the most important and most dangerous thing in the world. Not the subways, not terrorist attacks with vehicles, not cars, vehicles. No, it's climate change is the most important thing. No, this is all virtue signaling. This is the left trying to distract us from the very real and present concerns, and to also try and mitigate the consequences. The congestion tax. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, you brought up a good point, Michael, that we need to be paying attention to the legislation. Okay, I will guarantee that 95% or more of the common citizenry have no clue as to what bills are being pushed through.
Oh, guaranteed. Other than congestion tax, because New York State is
they find out about them after the fact. They don't know about them ahead of time.
No, not ahead of time. They know about the congestion tax because Kathy Hochul, because she wants to save money, she's spending money to advertise on social media a bunch of commercials about how great and how much money is going to be saved by the congestion tax, which means we're spending money to save money. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's a stupid idea. And I'll give it, here's the consequence. Here's the thing that people don't think of, because they go with the emotion of the moment. Oh yeah, climate change. I want to protect the environment. Yeah. So we're going to increase the cost of energy in the middle of a winter. We're going to increase the cost of energy for heating homes and vehicles. And we're going to increase congestion, traffic, people traveling around. We're going to increase those costs. But we also just trained every person under 40 to not cook. They don't already have, we already got rid of home ec. They don't get trained this in college. They don't know how to cook. They order everything. Here's your meal ready meals delivered to your home every week. We're going to have Uber Eats deliver food to you every single meal. This is because of the pandemic, the training that they've been given, and the lack of skills they have been given. What's going to happen when you increase the cost of transporting that food and the energy to make that food and to transport that food? Are poor people going to be better off, or are they going to be worse off? No one ever asked that question in the mainstream media, so the average person doesn't ask it, and then go, no, we're saving the environment. You're going to starve to death, and poor people are going to freeze to death in the middle of the winter. But we're saving the environment. China doesn't care. India doesn't care. 30 countries in Africa don't care. You're not saving the environment. So you've done nothing except make poor people more poor, made young people less cash. Well, also young people even more poor because they have no skills. And you've done nothing to actually solve any of the problems that you had. None of the problems are alleviated. And we think that's good government. And when progressives and Democrats will tell me, that's good government, Mike, because climate change, you haven't fixed climate change. You haven't fixed the debt at the state level, at the city level, at the national level. You haven't improved the quality of life for people who can't cook for themselves. You haven't done anything to improve the situation. I've never thought about it that way. I don't even know what to say to that. You know what I mean? And this happened across the country. I'm just using New York as the example on this, but this is happening across the country.
Well, it is. Okay. And there is a concerted effort to disarm Americans. Okay. And here's the thing, folks. Regardless of what you think about guns, the truth of the matter is once we are disarmed, we are powerless to stop our government from doing stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we're powerless. We then lose all control. Okay? And that is why the left is orchestrating so hard to remove the Second Amendment out of the Constitution.
Which is ironic considering that they're Marxists. And even in Marx's own words, basically, the workers were never to be disarmed, and they were to use every means possible
Actually,
to not be disarmed.
More of what they are promoting and stuff isn't so much Marxism as it is Stalinism.
Yeah.
That would be more accurate to it. Yes.
Okay, DEI is Stalinist.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's not just the DEI, it's the entire, there is a indoctrination in our education system. Kids are going through the system and they are coming out, and we've seen it since 2020. Parents have found out what their kids are being taught. We've now found out, because of the explosion of social media, the libs of TikTok, and we see the things that are on Blue Sky, the maps of Blue Sky. In other words, minor attracted persons on Blue Sky. We're seeing what is being introduced to the youngest of our kids at the youngest of ages. We have to tell the kids in kindergarten about the teacher's escapades over the weekend. Now, it doesn't matter what gender that teacher is. It doesn't matter what sexual preference that teacher is. Why does the kindergartner need to know that? Oh, but we have to tell them this for some reason. And what we're seeing is the culmination of that is a very controllable and stupid's the word, a stupid population. And I say not ignorant because they know there's a constitution. They know there's an amendment. They don't read it. They won't read it. They'll listen to someone talk about it for 30 seconds and they assume, well, they're popular, so they must be right. It's kind of like what we used to think about TV back in the 70s. Okay, Walter Cronkite, he's on TV. He's known. He must be right. It's on TikTok. A lot of people are watching it. It must be true. No, not at all. But it is enforcing that mentality that obey, don't question, and they're stripping away our rights at every single step. And like I said, with the example of New York, we get nothing for it.
This year, I'm going to sound like a broken record, and I do not care. Because until I get it drummed through your heads that we are the ones that have to take action in order to change this, I will not stop.
Yeah.
Okay. We can repeat about this over and over, and we keep repeating the same things over and over and over and over. Okay. About what's going on. And if you look at what's going on in our government, the same patterns are happening over and over and over and over again.
It's the definition of
Okay?
insanity.
It may just be a little different as far as the specifics go, but the principles are all the same.
Yeah.
And why is that? Is because we are allowing it.
Yeah. It's
Okay?
not enough to go to an election like in 2024 and then give the popular mandate to a president to say, stop the nonsense, and then walk away and expect them to stop the nonsense. People need to curb their expectations and stop thinking like, we got Trump elected, that's the end of the fight. That's not the case. If anything, we need to double down as the people and keep track of those that we've given the mandate to make sure that they follow through. That's our job as citizens.
And elections only go so far.
Right.
Folks. And Michael, you probably know this number already. I haven't researched it yet. How many incumbents, what's the percentage of incumbents that were reelected this year?
I don't have the exact number. It's the normal number is about 80 to 88% of incumbents will be reelected every year. And I know the overwhelming majority of everyone in 2024, the majority were reelected.
Yeah.
Overwhelmingly.
So right there says that we, the people, aren't even doing our job when it comes to election time. Because we keep voting in the same idiots term after term after term after term. Because they either have an R or a D behind their name.
There was something that came up on Twitter the other day that was asking about term limits. They wanted to see if they could legislate term limits into some of these things or change them. And I was like, in the absence of the people actually imposing term limits by voting, then yeah, you probably would need legislation for it. But what's the ideal? The ideal is that the people pay enough attention. It
won't change a damn thing.
No, but what I'm saying is,
when somebody gets to the end of their term, okay, bumps up against their term limit, the people are going to vote in the next person that their party puts in front of them. And it's going to be the same thing happening over.
This is actually worse than I thought. I just double checked the news on it. Now, this is coming from opensecrets.org. They are a truly independent source of just data about money and money in politics and election data. So this is a credible source internationally. According to their November 6, 2024 update, 2:30 Eastern Standard Time, there was a 98.5% re-election rate for the House.
Jesus.
In 2024. And for the Senate, there was a 90.9% re-election rate for the Senate. So we're talking, I was thinking 88%. We were far above the average in 2024. It is in the 90, we're talking about between the two, that would be about 95%, maybe even a little bit higher.
We're really holding our government accountable, folks.
Yeah. So that's
abysmal.
Yeah. We're really holding our government accountable.
Well, it tells you why nothing's changed. Why the pattern of things falling apart continues to fall apart. You got the same people who made the bad decision in 2023, 2022. Keep going back. They've been there. Half of them have been there for at least 2 decades. They're the ones who created all the problems. And are we surprised when you reelect them, they still don't have any of the solutions?
And Joel makes a good point, and he says the worst election statistic is the number of unopposed candidates who ran and, of course, won. And that's the other thing, is that we as citizens, if we are going to be active, have to put ourselves have to be able to count among our number people who are willing to step up and be civil servants to oust these other people. If you don't field opposition, then your silence is basically acquiescence. You're saying, yes, okay, whatever. The same person that screwed up my life last term can go ahead and have another term, because I'm not gonna run to oppose them. The system has become so predatory that no one wants the headache of having to go in there and clean it up. Now, can I fault them for that? Yes. But at the same time, I understand why many people don't, because they don't feel like they have the backing to be able to do it. And those that do challenge very often lose, because the machinery does not give them a fair shake when it comes to running. And they can't overcome the obstacles.
True. Okay, but here's the thing. We go in every 2 years and we pull the levers or make our little mark on the tablet or push the button or whatever. Okay? Nobody forces us to do that. Nobody forces which buttons we push or any of that.
Right.
But the thing is how many of those incumbents were primary?
Right.
That's the first problem. Okay? I don't care who it is. Every person should be primaried.
Yeah.
Okay? That's where we fall down, is we don't force that.
Yeah, that's
Okay?
one,
The next
that's one of
thing
our
is
main tools is primary.
we have convinced ourselves that we can't have more than 2 parties in this country because we're too afraid of, quote unquote, splitting the vote. Well, folks, if you
I never
do
liked the
then
party
you need to
system.
do the next thing.
I never liked the party
Require
system at all.
That there be a primary for every race, for every candidate. Okay.
Well, when Mike wrote that election legislation for New York, remember that legislation that Voss wrote?
I remember.
And that was where if you were able to garner 10% of your constituency, wasn't it? 10%, you could hold that would be your primary. Basically, you would be, that candidate would then be entered into the debates, and then would be a viable candidate on the ballot. No party has to be involved
on this. Is if anybody can get enough support, they should be put on the ballot, period.
Yeah. It's straightforward. There's no hoops. The only hoop you have to
rid of
jump
the primary system
support.
and put everybody on the ballot.
Yeah.
One moment, guys. There is breaking news. I did see this was mentioned in the chat, and I just was double checking about it. And I think it should be mentioned because we're talking about how our culture is breaking down. We're talking about people not paying attention. Laws no longer have the weight that they should. And people are just assuming that elected person will take care of everything. And when they say we're safe and it's good, it must be good. That's not the reality. And there is now news, and I now have been able to confirm it on a couple of different spots. So first, let me just show you that this is confirmed. This is the rumor that was out there. This is off of Facebook. This is coming from Las Vegas locally, that there is a hostage situation in Las Vegas right now, as of approximately 20 minutes ago. But that isn't the final thing. There is another, where is it?
Is it related to the Cybertruck?
No. Okay. Well, at least we don't think so at this moment. Again, it's ongoing. It is current, and a far better source right now. There we go. This is being confirmed by the Gateway Pundit. Now they are, yes, many people say, well, Mike, they're right-leaning. Doesn't matter. They are accurate no matter how they may write. You may not like the way they write the article. The news itself is factual. They are confirming.
And this isn't a right or a left thing. It's
No.
an active situation.
Yeah, but that's the excuse you'll often hear is, oh, well, it's just you're going to a source that's on the right. So, it can't be true. No, it is true. And I have been looking for multiple sources right now. It is very difficult. It is ongoing. So a lot of news media haven't looked at this yet. So it's still coming out. But what we understand at this moment is this individual. This is on South Fremont Street in Las Vegas. As I said, it started about 20-ish, 30-ish minutes ago. SWAT is on the scene at this time. It is unclear if this is connected to the Cybertruck explosion that happened earlier today. There's just not enough data. We don't know. But it is happening right now. And I think the thing that's most important about it is, why are we seeing these things? These aren't things that normally happen. We don't get hostages normally, especially on New Year's Day. But that's not a common occurrence across this country. We don't normally get explosions in front of hotels on New Year's Day, but in general across this country, we are starting to see a trend, and this trend is very specific. Leftists and or individuals of a radical religious ideology using their cars to run into crowds and kill people. That is a trend. That is becoming a trend. It's almost, in fact, in every case I'm aware of, going back to 2017, every time we've seen it happen, and it's happening more now than it had in the past, it's always a far leftist going into a crowd every single time. Why are these things happening? Because our society is falling apart. When we don't have laws that mean what the laws say, when we don't have politicians that we believe in and trust, when we have news media that lie to people's faces for 4 years, it's now come out that the first day, January 21st, 2021, Joe Biden was mentally incapable of holding the job of president. We know this now. It's come out in the New York Times. White House aides have now admitted, for all 4 years, Joe Biden has been incapable of doing the job. They've been lying to our face every day. When you have no trust in media or government, and you have no results, we start seeing radicals using vehicles to go and run over crowds. And I have yet to hear any Democrat say, oh, well, we've got to ban all the cars then, right? Because, that's what they say about every gun crime. Oh, you used a gun, people died. Oh, they used a car, people died. No more cars. Get rid of all the cars, right? Oh, no, but we have a right to that. Can't do that. The system makes no sense anymore. It's incredible. I don't understand. And that's why we're seeing these things happen more now, is that the system is falling apart. It is breaking apart.
I think that's also a reflection of our culture. Like one of the things that holds a nation together is the homogeneity of its culture, and we don't have it now. We used to have a sort of civic nationalism that was able to unite people that came here from abroad, people that were born here. And when you came to America or you were living in America, you were an American, and you believed in this sort of civic nationalism that held the entire country together. We believed that we had a system that protected individual rights, that free exercise of those individual rights, and the system worked. It provided prosperity, it provided security, both in person and in property. We don't have that anymore. Now what we have over the course of the last 80 years is this culture that has said, no, you must be segregated, you must be placed along lines of either race or ethnicity or culture. And America is the civic nationalistic culture that used to hold America together is a bad thing. It is a terrible thing. It is an evil thing, and we need to divest ourselves of it. And in the divesting of ourselves of it, we have now put into place a system that is rife with corruption, rife with authoritarianism, and the only thing that can kind of control the downward death spiral of the United States is an authoritarian government. And that's the mindset that these people have. And it's our job, and one of the missions that we've taken on as the Liberty First Foundation is to say, no, that is not the case. The reason we have this problem is not because we have killed the idea or that the idea didn't work. It's because we left the system alone and divested ourselves or abdicated our responsibilities as citizens, and the government fell apart as a result of our inaction. This is why we need to bring back the culture of America and liberty first principles that were signed and ratified by the Constitution or within the Constitution.
The thing is, we've got a government that's out of control, and we've got people that are complacent in being out of control.
Yeah.
And user's correct. You can't import people from nations who hate the host and expect it to be stable. That's true. But that's why our immigration system is broken, because the people that are coming here are not coming to assimilate. They're coming to loot. They're coming in a sense. They're coming to loot, and they're coming to divest us of our wealth and send it home.
That, okay, user put this out. Okay. But it's still, the fundamental issue is we, the people, aren't involved enough in our governance. And this, what user says, is one of the results of our non-involvement.
Right.
Well, it's not a new thing, by the way.
No, it's been going on for a long time.
Well, as an example, the H-1B visas, which everyone heard about in the last week.
That was a good video, by the way.
I
just want to say.
Most people don't know. I did a video about it. H-1B visas has been an issue that I have been following, and many Republicans have been following.
Since the 90s.
Since 2013. Yeah, it's been over a decade. And Democrats don't talk about this because they don't care. And the big problem is it's a question of money versus immigration problems. Now, the fact is we have 6 to 1 Americans who have STEM degrees, but they're expensive. And according to all the polling, half of the Americans that are going into STEM, they can't do any work. They're horrible at the job. And they get fired because they have no skills, as opposed to overseas, like India, where 74% of these H-1B visas come from. They're coming in and they've had to work their life to get to this point. So they come in, and about 10% of them become illegal aliens. They stay over the visa. So this is what we're being told is the radical civil war within the Republican Party. This is a conversation we've been having since 2013. Democrats are happy to have the same number, 85,000 visa people with visas or more. They don't care because that feeds into illegal immigration. The thing is, when we're looking at this, India doesn't hate America. 74% of all the H-1B visas come from India.
India loves America.
They love America. And by the way, the real high-tech jobs in STEM that go with H-1B visas, it's call centers. When you call in and you get Punjab, who's talking on the phone with you, yeah, that's a STEM job, believe it or not. That's the high-tech jobs they're talking about. But they don't hate America. They come, and even when they're illegal aliens, they come, they stay, they generally build in businesses. They don't They're not part of the high crime rate. We get people from Angola. We get people from the Middle East. We get people from Venezuela. Yeah, they're the problem. And they hate America.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if we're talking, but people don't understand there's two different arguments here. H-1B visas, that's not, yeah, there's an immigration component. It's about money. It's about the economy. But we're lost. People haven't paid attention to it. All they see is the headline. Oh my God, Republicans are going crazy about this. It's never been talked about before. No one's ever talked about this issue. No one knows what it is. Yes, we do. We've been talking about it for over a decade, 11 years. This is not new. This isn't surprising anyone. It's been an ongoing argument. And it's a question of what's the biggest impact? Is it worth it to the economy? Is it going to be too much? Is it going to tip over immigration? But the public doesn't know and they don't pay attention. They're getting a 30-second headline and they're saying, hey, that's all we need to know. Because Kathy Hochul said it was bad and CNN said it was bad. Yeah, these people also lied to you. We know this for a fact. They've now admitted they lied to you. The biggest lie of 2024. Joe Biden is mentally stable. Biggest lie. And this has been a lie for 4 years. And yet we have people who go, oh, I don't need to know what's going on with the laws. I don't need to pay attention to the details. I'm just going to go with the headline and trust the people who lied to my face. I don't get it. I don't get it. How can we not have America falling apart? They lied to your face.
Yeah. No, because the pain, there's no pain for them to just believe in the 30-second soundbite. They won't feel the pain until it's too late. And that's the biggest problem, is the complacency that we've had for decades, hoping that the system would work that was put in place by our forefathers and you know the people that built the system and let it run. At a certain point, they trusted that the system would just take care of itself and we could just go about our lives.
Here's a key indicator. Okay, because a lot of Democrat pundits on various social media platforms and so forth have been literally going off about how Trump is going to, quote unquote, tear down the government. Okay, by eliminating the Department of Education and several other things.
I don't think he's going to go far enough.
That's exactly what needs to happen, people.
Yeah.
That is exactly what needs to happen.
But I don't think he'll ever be able to go far enough.
The thing is, the fact that we have so many people fighting to keep our current dysfunctional government in place is very telling.
Yeah. Yeah. Because what's the alternative?
It needs to be torn down.
They look at it. These people that are saying that we need to affect gradual change, right? We've been affecting gradual change forever, but it's never been in the correct direction. Just look at the history of the performance of our government. Every time there's a new law put into place, does an old one get repealed? No. Does a bad law get repealed? No. Does it ever get enforced? No. But it's still there in case they want to enforce it. Sometimes they've stopped the leftward drift of governance. And this goes with whoever's in Congress at the time. Sometimes our representatives will get a reprieve of a couple of years where the leftward drift towards leftist authoritarianism will be slowed down to a small crawl. But there's never been a time where we have ever gained ground back towards some semblance of normalcy in the center. Not even to the right, just to the center. The closest we ever came was maybe in Reagan's years, and that was very brief. That was first term Reagan, not second term. And in 2016 with Trump, when he put into the effect, well, if you're going to make a new regulation, you have to remove 5. That was an excellent step. People don't remember that, but Trump made it a thing where these bureaucrats who were making regulations, if you were going to put in a new regulation, you had to remove 5 old ones. So this type of deregulation and taking and cutting down on bureaucratic crap and bloat and getting rid of bad law should be the focus of this administration for the next 2 years. And that's going to cause a lot of waves. And I don't think he's going to have the support to do that because it's going to cause a lot of upheaval. People have gotten so used to that kind of regulatory authority, they're not going to know what to do with themselves without it.
I have up on the screen the Declaration of Independence. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Put forth by the Second Continental Congress, July 4th, 1776. It was actually ratified in the Congress on July 2nd, 1776.
Right.
Okay. The first paragraph. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which compel them to the separation.
Right.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted amongst men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed.
Right.
That when any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it.
Yes.
And to institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles as organizing its powers in such form that they shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes.
Right. And these are not light and transient causes for which we are asking the government to be dismantled. Okay. Your rights are being trampled. And I think it was Josie from the Redheaded Libertarian. She's had a running thread for the last year and a half, maybe 2 years, where she takes each of the abuses that were in the Declaration of Independence and she gives examples and shows receipts for every single abuse in the Declaration of Independence that our government has been perpetrating on the American people for the last 60 years.
Now, right there, our country was founded on the principle that government is operated by the consent of the people. And right. Even when we were under monarchies and even an authoritarian government gets its powers by the consent of the people. Now, they may coerce that consent or whatever, but still, they cannot remain in power without the consent of the people. The very things that are going on in this country today, being instituted by our government today, is with our consent. Now, you may say, well, I didn't say that I consented to that.
Right.
Did you say you opposed it? Did you say that you opposed it in any form other than just saying to somebody else, well, I don't agree with that? Did you tell your elected representatives that you did not like that piece of legislation?
Yeah.
did you act to get that legislation stopped before it even went to a vote?
Yeah.
In whatever legislature it was in. If you didn't do that, then you consented.
Right. Well, that's like I was saying earlier in the stream, is your silence is acquiescence. You're ignoring what your representatives are doing is basically confirming that the representatives are free to go ahead with whatever it is they're planning.
If you allow it to happen and continue to allow it to happen, you are consenting.
Right.
And we are consenting to our government that they are doing a fine and wonderful job.
Consenting by absentia.
Because we are not stepping up and saying, hey, you can't do that. Hey, we don't like that. Hey, stop.
Yeah.
Until we start doing that as a nation, as a people, as United States citizens, as Americans, we are consenting.
And you do see some pushback. I'm not going to say that there isn't. Like social media has become a prime ground for real-time dissension when it comes to bad policy or bad legislation. But complaining about it on social media is not the same as collecting 50 of your like-minded constituents, going down to your representative's office and sitting in his lobby until he pays attention to you. It's not the same.
It's not the same as going to your town council meeting,
right,
and saying, hey, what the hell are you guys thinking? It's not the same as going to your school board meetings and saying, you're teaching my kids what?
Right.
Okay.
And
you're
there
not
is
doing that. You are consenting.
And there will be consequences for that. Like the government doesn't like, just like, because it's made of people and people don't like being told what to do. You're going to have the consequence where the government is going to utilize every resource at its disposal to chill the effect of your dissension. You're going to go to that student, that high school board meeting. You're going to bring the argument forward on the floor, and there's a very real possibility that you'll be escorted out by the sheriff. There's a very real possibility that you'll have a knock on the door. There's a very real possibility that you are going to put your livelihood at risk because you
want to know
dissent.
something? Every time that happens, that's a good thing because it builds support for you.
Right.
Because you are the underdog and they are the big bad bully.
Yep. And there's nothing that Americans hate worse than a bully.
Okay. So start standing up for your rights. Start standing up. Start fulfilling your obligation as citizens of the United States. Step up to your civic responsibilities. Because, folks, we have to do that not for our generation, but for the generations that are yet to come. We were blessed when the founding generation did what they did and stood up against tyranny. We face that same crisis today, and it is up to us to stand up against it.
And honestly,
I'm not calling for you to bear arms,
no,
or any of that stuff. I'm calling for you to start getting involved with your governance
as citizens. And it's funny because Voss and I were talking about it, and when he comes back, we could ask him. But one of the things that we talked about is that the government doesn't care about you. The government doesn't care about me. We're older. We're going to die. What they care about are the subsequent generations, and they want those subsequent generations to be subservient. And the only way that the subsequent generations become subservient is if they don't see an example of what it means to be a proper citizen.
Well, the way future generations become subservient is because current generations refuse to do their civic duty.
Right. And there's no example to follow. Like, that's the thing, is like much of our education is about imitation. So if you don't have any examples to follow of what it is to actually be a citizen and utilize every means at your disposal to
There's plenty
nonviolent,
of examples.
right? But I'm saying in terms
Go
of the
to
current
YouTube and search for people at school board meetings, at town council meetings,
but
airing their grievances.
But your current generation will not do that unless you show them as an example of why it's important to do so. It comes down to the family unit. Like if I myself never discussed politics with my family, and I never taught my kids where to go to look at the information, they may come across it in their timeline from once in a while, but they're not going to go actively look for examples unless I tell them why the examples are important. And I teach them that they need to look out for these things because it shows that our country is still working, our culture is still working.
And true, we need to be teaching our children how to do this.
Right.
Okay. And the thing is, if you don't know how to do this, history is filled with examples.
But you got to make sure that you're pointing to history and to get them to learn it and why it's relevant. One of the biggest failings that I found in the education world when it comes to teaching history is that they're all about teaching these big events, but they never draw any kind of relevancy between why it's important for the person that's sitting in that chair right now trying to learn this stuff. One of the greatest things that ever happened to me and it happened while I was overseas, because I was overseas learning. I was on a student visa while I was overseas. And I actually took an American history course from a foreign perspective. And it was only then that I got the relevancy of why history was so important. Because my teacher at the time didn't just teach us facts. He taught the context within why those facts were important and their relevancy to how I got to be sitting in his classroom that day. That is a critical component of historical teaching that you don't get through the modern education system today. I've seen it.
Now, we're going to be changing the format of our weekly roundtables. Yeah, we are going to touch on some of the events and stuff. Okay, mostly to use them as examples and so forth.
Right.
But this next year, we're going to start turning this into more of an instructive forum.
Edutainment. We're going to be using it as edutainment.
Okay, because folks, honestly, we need to start getting people organized to start taking our country back, to start restoring the power back to the people as it was intended.
Yeah.
Okay. Quit relying on government to fix our problems, and we need to start fixing our own problems. And one of the first areas we need to start fixing problems is in our government.
Yeah.
Okay. Because government's not going to fix itself. That we've seen. Okay. And it's been proven out. It's time for us to fix the problem.
And even even changing the government is even more abstract. Let's start even smaller. Let's start with your home life, your own life. Like if you can't reconcile a culture or promote a culture of at a cultural level of liberty first principles, then trying to change the government is a monumental exercise. Yeah, it starts with you. It starts with me. I learn something new every day. and I keep at it every day because I want to understand what it means to be an American citizen. I want to know what it means
I
to be a
intentionally,
liberty first principled person.
okay, and this is me. This is what I do. Okay, and I don't expect anybody else to do it. But I'm just going to give you an example. I very rarely listen to any type of music. Okay, when I'm driving around in my truck, I've got an audiobook going or I've got a podcast going. Okay, and 9 times out of 10, it is something about the early history of the United States.
Yeah.
Okay, so I am learning about the context. I'm learning about what was going on. I'm learning about what set the stage to bring about the government that we have.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also learning about what's happened since then to get us to the point where we're at now.
Right.
Okay, and folks, that's where we need to start looking. Okay, we need to start understanding what happened from between 1776 and now. And if you look at it, and I've looked at a lot of this stuff, like I said, I've dedicated hours to it. A lot of what was going on pre-revolution is playing out in our country today. And you can try to say that no, it's not, that it's different and this, that, and the other. Go learn for yourself. Okay? Go learn for yourself. You want to know what the tax rate that the Sons of Liberty were so upset about was? Less than 1%. It was less than 1% that caused the Boston Tea Party. And here we are, we're talking about taxing people at 90%. Come on, folks, wake up. Okay, folks, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. We're going to be doing these shorter, mainly because we need balance. And also we need time to gather information and so forth. We do enjoy our time with you. And again, like I said, we're going to start coming at this more with an educational entertainment type of format. Because honestly, you can get the news from anywhere.
Yeah.
The thing is you need to start getting the tools in order to start affecting the change that we need to see. And that's what we need to do. Okay, you find us here every week, Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Folks, get involved. Join organizations. Start organizing. Start setting up things in your neighborhoods. Okay? Let's get this country back to the foundation that it was founded upon. Okay, and we have to do it. We can't expect anybody else to.
No, and the other part of that is if you don't do it, say you don't get involved, you don't want any part of it. Well, then the America that was founded, the America that brought most of the most of the known world up a peg in terms of their living situation and prosperity, that's gone. And all you're going to see is another landmass that operates just like everywhere else in the world, that will be authoritarian in nature, and we won't ever leave this planet. There will be no greater dream of reaching for the stars. There will be no expansion of humanity. What you'll basically have is feudalism returned to the face of this earth. And that's not hyperbole. That's historic. That's what we see, is that these political systems that are authoritarian in nature always return to a type of feudalism where the masses are enslaved. They're made subject to a small group, and that group becomes the new nobility and the new monarch.
Well, think of it like this. We had less than 10% of our government change in 2024. Less than 10%. We showed you the numbers earlier in the show. How much change do you think is going to happen? If you didn't, and across the nation, the majority of people, regardless of whatever political preference you may have, for whatever reason, we all wanted to see change. We all looked at the last 4 years and said, this isn't where we want to go. Our government is failing us. And things that are happening in New York City and what we're seeing in Las Vegas and what we're seeing in California and Illinois, Massachusetts, we can go state by state. We are seeing that breakdown, and we didn't change the government. We have 10%. So we're going to have, going by those numbers, only 10% change, only 10% improvement. Obviously, I hope for way, way more than that. But if you're not involved, how do you expect things to change?
Yep. So that's
very well put, Michael. Okay, folks, we're going to go ahead. Like I said, we're going to go ahead and get off here. Join us again next week. We'll continue on with this and go into it in a lot more depth. And we have to become the change.
And hopefully
government's not going to do it. They've proved that.
And hopefully over the course of the year, as you tune into us, and we put forward the original documentation, and we will also give you the tools. We'll present you the tools to use to be that face of change. You're not going to go out there unarmed. We're not big on disarmament. We're big on arming and empowering people.
We're going to give you the tools. We're going to give you the weapons to fight back.
Yes.
And to do so in a manner that is consistent with our principles.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, thank you, everybody. We'll see you again next week. 8 p.m. Eastern time. You all take care.